Jesus Christ teaches the way back to our eternal home. He understands our Heavenly Father's plan of eternal progression better than any of us. After all, He is the keystone of it all.
Travis Wingetzel. So the other day, Pamela had made a comment on one video and then made another comment on another video, and I replied on both of them. But one of her comments was that Fair Latter-day Saints, which used to be Fair Mormon, which used to be Fair, which used to be Farms, had informed her that there are many interpretations of the inverted pentagram. And so people shouldn't rush to judgment that Mormons worship Lucifer. And that Lucifer's plan of happiness is taught within the temple endowment, because the inverted pentagram is on the keystone of the doors of the Salt Lake Temple. And so Mormon apologists outright lie. There is no alternate symbol, no alternate meaning for the inverted pentagram. It literally means a falling star. It's the universal symbol of a falling star. And so it's unfortunate that Mormon apologists are not able to tell people the truth and are purposely lying to Mormons so that they remain within the church that they believe is of Jesus Christ, rather than the Church of Lucifer, even though Joseph Smith's church was a Jewish version. So yeah, there's lots of confusion, and it's unfortunate that Mormons are unable to come to grips with reality and truth. If you're unfamiliar with the news, Methodists have split because of the LGBTQ issue. And so there's a group that have formed a completely separate Methodist church. And the core Methodists are in a panic because of those who have decided to leave. They're the, I guess you can call them the orthodoxy. And so why Mormons, who think they're Christian, can't do the same thing? It's because we're not Christian. So there's nobody, the church is not structured like a Christian church. It's structured like the Vatican, which is not technically Catholic either, because they've got to protect themselves against their individual pastors around the world who get in trouble with the law. Whereas in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, if a bishop gets in trouble, the church gets in trouble, because of the administrative structure is designed not to fracture. And so when there are problems in the orthodoxy, Mormons are out of luck. They just have to leave if they're going to be brave enough to do so. And so as a result, you have the same type of mafia pressure to stay in the church, remain silent, lie, alter definitions and meanings to justify remaining in the church. You're creating a fantasy world of the church. You are creating your version of Mormonism, when the plain and simple reality that everybody from the outside looking in sees is that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is a fraud. It's the Church of Lucifer posing as the Church of Jesus Christ, claiming Joseph, who was Jewish. Now, do you see why Joseph Smith refers to the great and abominable church as abominable? Verse 19 of the first vision, guys. And so, they've tried to claim, Mormon apologists, that the inverted pentagram, meaning Lucifer, was a more recent development, that it had to do with the mid-1900s and a specific person who organized a group and claimed the attachment. Wrong. There have been others, and I could refer to Albert Pike in the late 1800s, who, as a Scottish Rites Freemason, said that he was joined with the Illuminati and Luciferianism. Doctrine of Lucifer is mentioned there, with his intention of the plot to destroy Christianity in the Third World War, the latter days, so that everybody would worship Lucifer. So he ties Freemasonry of the Scottish Rites with the Illuminati and Lucifer. And so Illuminati used Lucifer as their symbol, Lucifer meaning light bearer, bearer of light. And yeah, they would love to have you believe that it's harmless. What's wrong with being a bearer of light? Except for religion. And so this is where Mormons again are claiming ignorance, but they're also revealing their ignorance of Scripture. It's in the book of Isaiah, which is in the book of Mormon, which means Joseph Smith knew this and understood that the inverted pentagram was a symbol of Lucifer. And so, yeah, it's how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. And there might be a couple of you who would recognize that the Hebrew text does not include this. It's our King James Version that does. And so then you might be questioning, well, it was the authors of the King James translation who purposely added it in. No. It originates in the Latin Vulgate text. Lucifer is a Latin word. And so there it is in the Latin version. And that was around 400 CE. So that's a long time for it to be around and referring to Lucifer. But if we're going to skip all of this, trying to trace it back through history to try to find the origin, why not just go to the oldest documents on Earth, the Egyptians? There you will see its origins. And so the one particular scene that I'm using for this video is from the tombs of the pharaohs. And the particular scene that we'll go over does not have text. And so Egyptologists are unable to render a translation because it's not in any sign list. The stars are, the boat, the jackals, the cobras, but they're not in a text. And so Egyptologists don't know how to translate this. They then claim, because they're PhDs in positions of trust at universities, will say that, no, this is not to be translated. Just say you don't know. Because it is to be translated. And this simple little upper frame alone that I will be going over can fill volumes of books of information that is contained in this simple little picture. And so I'm just going to summarize and get to the main points for you. The overarching woman is Nut. She is the goddess of the heavens. And it can't simply be said to be outer space, because there's more to it than that with the stories that are told of her. But you see these red circles in her body and at her mouth. She is swallowing the sun. And so the sun is going in her mouth and then back in reverse direction, because the sun, as we see it in the sky, goes from east to west. The sun is instead going reverse in a direction. And this has to do with the concept of what happens to the sun after it sets in the sky. And so they're portraying that it goes into the underworld to be born the next day. But what is interesting is that you see the star symbols all along her body, even on the curve, they're all pointing up for stars, except for two that are right there at her throat and in her cheek. They are turned upside down, but so is her head. But yet her body, as it's curving, are still stars pointing up. That is significant. They're trying to teach you something, which can fill at least a volume, if not 2 or 3. It's because this is a judgment scene. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Egyptian judgment scene, but that usually contains the scales of judgment of Ma'at. Don't worry if you don't know the attachment to the names. But when a person dies, they are brought before the scales of judgment. Their heart is weighed on the scales. They have to pass the judgment in order to proceed to have their name written in the book of life, presented at the veil before the Holy of Holies in the presence of God, to become like Osiris, our Heavenly Father. And if you fail, you are devoured by the devourer beast that is a mixture of multiple animals. And so this is a different variation of the judgment scene, and it's showing the two different types of judgments at the last day, which is personified by the setting sun that is going in her mouth. And so you have people who live their life, and then when they die, that's considered the end of the day. And that's when they get judged as to how they live their life. On the scales of judgment, there are the 42 affirmations that a person is judged by. It is summarized as the 10 Commandments. The only ones that are not included are worshiping one God and the Sabbath day. Those are not included in the Egyptian 42 affirmations. And it's because Babylon created the Sabbath day. So when the Jews were taken captive into Babylon in 600 BCE, which was technically 586, they became assimilated into Babylon, into Babylonian culture, and thus adopted the seventh day as a day of superstitious rest, so that no work can be done on that day. And I've done those videos for you, but we're not talking about that. And so for Egypt, yeah, there was really only Amun. He was the supreme god of the Egyptians. But there were other stories that told of him. So the story of Osiris, for example, he is Amun. On earth, he is son Amun. In heaven, he is father Amun. But in the story form, they used the name Osiris, and his son's name is Horus. And so that, again, would have to fill volumes to fully explain that whole situation. The father becomes the son becomes the father. And thus, when the father dies, the son takes over on the throne. And so, Nut represents the afterlife. And you'll notice that Joseph Smith is correct, that only in the spirit world is there a heaven and a hell. Those who've passed the judgment for the first wave, and those who have failed their judgment in that first wave. And then, of course, the sun is those who get exalted to the highest degree of celestial kingdom in the presence of Osiris. So Joseph Smith knew what he was talking about, even though Christians have purposely stripped it of all its meaning. And so the band down the middle leading to her mouth, that's the path of the sky in the daytime. The zodiac, technically, because the sun, the moon, pass through the zodiac in the sky. But in this particular case, it's just referring to the sun. And so notice there are no sun symbols on this band. It has water symbols because the sky is considered the upper waters. If you're familiar with Genesis chapter 1, the upper waters separate from the lower waters. And the sky is the firmament, or rakia, or rakiyang, as Joseph Smith was taught, in between. And so there really is no, the upper waters are symbolized with boats sailing on them, similar to the Nile River, because during inundation, the whole land is flooded, and it merges with the sky, and so it's hard to tell the difference between the two of them, and thus the creation story, the way it was told, the upper waters and the lower waters, when the dry land appears rising up. And so you have the sun only at the mouth. It's the end of the day. And talking about the nighttime, the afterlife. So it's not referring to the works during the day. But you will see the boat that's there that is traveling on that path. That's to help you understand that that's the daytime sky. And it is not repeated on the lower frame. Now there's sections here that could be text if it were scratched out or faded off. We do see in her upper body that on the right side there does seem to be some fading stars from the oxidization that have been let in when the tombs were opened, which is a good thing why they were photographing this, to make sure that these are preserved. But there was a situation where successive kings would go back and delete the history and identity of the previous pharaohs because they disapproved, and they're now ruler, and their word is now law. And again, there's volumes that could be written about that. And so it's unclear from the photograph as to what's going on in those frames, if they are truly just empty, or if it's something that originally had text for Egyptologists to translate and claim they know something. or what. Typically you would see text accompanying it, and in the lower frame it looks like it's possible there could have been, but yeah, it's not likely here. But in the lower frame you do see lists of different items. It's a category list, a storehouse, warehouse listing type of thing. But we're not focusing on that, because again, this video is already 23 minutes long. And so both the upper and the lower frames are heading towards Nut. And when you're reading Egyptian, you typically would read into the faces. So whichever direction the face is pointing, that's where you start reading. And typically there's a point of origin to start reading from. In facsimile number 2, for example, there's the little headpiece that sticks up into the upper rim that lets you know this is where you start to read. And you read into the faces. And it goes around. And so, yeah, there's not quite a consistency as a result. But nonetheless, here, Nut is the focal point, her face. That's where you read into. And so it's this way. And so you read out. But it's not really a text to read. It's a picture scene. And so you have a whole group of men lined up on the top row and on the bottom rows. And it's not repeated. They are different But the cobras and the 2 jackals are repeated. Sort of the people on the upper and lower frames, but the one set of people hanging upside down along the band of the sky waters do not seem to be repeated above. But again, that section, it could be carved out. It's unclear. Being in a tomb, it's not likely to have been carved out. It doesn't look like it would be faded off because of the level of fading of the stars above. And so it's unclear from just a picture to be able to identify what's going on here. But just the general concept is that you see above the men walking to their judgment at the end of their life have stars pointing up in that band. And both band of stars are pointing up. These are the men who passed their judgment and are going on into the afterlife of paradise, as Mormons call it. Joseph Smith referred to it as. But you'll notice on the band that divides the 2 scenes is not the same. You have stars pointing up, but above the people who are pointing down, you have inverted pentagrams in stick figure form. This is the origin of falling stars. And there are other scenes in which these people are not upside down. You'll notice on facsimile number 2 that the people on the lower frame are upside down, even though the text is right side up. This was done on purpose because it's a sun, so it's a circle. So you're supposed to actually turn the hypocephaly, phallus, as you read the text. And thus, what appears upside down is actually to be read right side up. But here, that's not the case. This is not a circular sun. This is only the sky. And so these people are purposely drawn upside down. They failed their judgment and are going to the spirit prison, so to speak. There are other scenes in the tombs of the Ramsey pharaohs of the swine going back into the sea after failing their judgment with Jesus. Jesus versus Legion. And that's what they are portraying. And the Bible is rendering a version of translation from that, calling Jesus as Pharaoh Ramses. Take your pick as to which tomb and which pharaoh. And then Legion are the humans who failed their judgment in life and go back to the spirit world, spirit paradise, or spirit hell, to await a later judgment, a lesser judgment. They don't get to be celestialized. They don't get to be like Osiris in the afterlife. They don't get to enter into his presence. These people, likewise, these guys failed their judgment and are going to spirit hell rather than spirit paradise, as the upper ones are. And so thus, the stars in that band above their head are pointing down. to correspond with their bodies pointing down. These are falling stars as falling humans. They fell. They failed their judgment. And this is where the concept of a falling star comes from, the Egyptians. This is where it is in origin. And Joseph Smith taught it, and Mormon apologists are lying to you because they don't know. And rather than just saying they don't know, which would be the better thing to say, because the church will never answer you. Because guys like me will be the ones to answer you, and that's why Mormon apologists think they've got to step in and protect Mormons from science and truth with lies and diversionary tactics. So, there you have it. That's the origin of the inverted pentagram, and it was quite lengthy of a brief description, wasn't it? Like I said, this can take volumes to explain just these two scenes alone. I could do more on the boat scene there with the two people that are at the front of the boat, and etc. And I could tell you about Lilith attached to Nut, because that's her. She's in Genesis. Lila is how it's spelled in Genesis from the Hebrew text. But first wife of Adam. So there you go.